Maybe they're true, maybe they're not. These are 5 chilling campfire stories that will keep you up tonight. Kind of like this video showing a strange humanoid creature hovering just out of view of these campers. You're watching it on Darkness Prevails, the best channel to share your creepy stories with the world, like an online campfire, because this world is a strange one. Let's dig in, shall we? Number 1. The Girl in the Mirror. Submitted by Ampwitch. I was at a campout with my youth group. We sat around the campfire, and some of us began to tell scary stories. I remember one in particular that really scared me. I don't recall it word for word, but I do remember the basic idea. It went something like this. A young boy was given the task to house sit for a couple who were going away on their honeymoon. He had nothing better to do in his spare time, as it was the summer, and he didn't have many friends to hang out with, or many things to do. But he really did need the extra cash, so he was more than happy to help out. They handed him a list of chores that needed to be done each day. He assured them he would look after the place well. They thanked him and went on their way. He made sure all the chores were done that were on the list, like taking out the trash, sweeping, and vacuuming. He went down the whole list, checking everything after he did them, just to be sure. But there was one last thing to do. The laundry in the basement. Having been in a hurry, the couple didn't have time to do it all before they left. He sighed and just decided to get it over with. He didn't mind laundry, but he never liked basements. He had been fortunate enough to have grown up in a house without one. He mentally prepared himself, walked down into the old, dusty, cold room. He couldn't find a light switch, but there was a tiny bit of sunlight coming through from the basement window, just enough to see his way around. Then he got to work on the laundry, his eyes slowly adjusting to the dark around him. After folding the dried clothes and throwing the wet ones into the dryer, he carried the now clean and folded laundry with him on his way to the stairs. And that's when he noticed something. A mirror set on the wall. He stopped for a second to take in its beauty. It was an antique mirror with artistic designs in the rusty metal frame. It was odd when taken in with the rest of the house. It didn't match, but its classical design was beautiful. Then he noticed the reflection. He could make out what appeared to be the silhouette of a little girl with a knife in her hand. It surprised him at first. Then he realized it might just be the way the stuff back there was stacked, the shape coming alive as a result of his imagination. He shrugged it off and continued upstairs to complete his task. This would be his routine for the next week or so, and each time he would glance in the mirror, and the silhouette of the girl would stand there behind him. Each time, however, he noticed it would stand a little bit closer, and closer, and closer. He was a bit unnerved by this, but still simply assumed it was a silhouette caused by a stack of things creating a random shape that just appeared to be a person. If he looked behind himself, he would see nothing, so surely there was nothing to worry about. Maybe it was his perception getting the better of him, his eyes playing tricks in the darkness. One day, when the silhouette of what appeared to be the girl was almost directly behind him, or appeared to be, he decided to turn around and to check it out. But again, he didn't see anything at all. Just the washer and the dryer, some other items here and there, but nothing to make the shape that he saw in the mirror. Somewhat creeped out, he sped back upstairs and closed the door behind him. He thought about it for a few minutes and again decided that he was just seeing things. Curse his overactive imagination. His fear of basements and the dark combined had gotten the better of him. Finally, the last day came. The owners to the house came back and paid him for his service, thanking him for a job well done. Just as he stepped out the door, he stopped. There was just something he had to know. He turned around and asked the owners a question. "What's the weird situation with that mirror in the basement?" They looked at him, a bit puzzled. Then they looked at each other. What they said next sent chills down the boy's spine. "We don't have a mirror in the basement." Number 2. Rural Field. Submitted by Kit Ridge. This happened when I was around 10 or 11 years old, when my parents were divorced. My dad had a full 6 weeks with my younger brother, and I had the whole summer with him. Both of us were very excited to spend time with our father. Naturally, he still had to work for that time, but while he had us, he also was letting my oldest sister and her roommate friend stay with him during the summer, until school started again, and they headed off to college. This way, he had a couple of guaranteed babysitters while he worked very late nights at his job, which was over an hour away. My brother and I loved it. Our sister was caring but laid back, and her friend was super nice and easygoing. For the two of us, it was a great summer. Of course, there was one incident. My dad lived in a very rural town in Indiana. When I say rural, I mean very rural. It wasn't the boonies or anything like that, but it was very much in the middle of nowhere. If you try to drive to this town, you'll face nothing but miles and miles of fields and corn, until you suddenly hit the town, which seemingly appears from nowhere. Don't get me wrong, I miss the town sometimes. That was where I went to school the first 8 years of my life before the divorce, and I have fond memories of the huge park and eating ice cream on the weekends as a Sunday treat. By day, the town was normal, but at night, you would find yourself being very hesitant to go outdoors. Back then, there was no major crimes that happened at night. I mean, the worst that came from it were teen hooligans or the town's infamous crazy lady, who scowled and flipped the bird at everyone, who nonetheless was rather harmless. Do you know that feeling, though, you get when you see an area or setting at night that doesn't seem threatening at all during the day, but now that it's dark, you have second thoughts about it? That was the feeling you got in the dead of night. Now, my sister was a likable girl. She had made a few friends in the town with other high school graduates. They had a couple of kids around the age of my brother and I, so we could also be entertained as well. One night, we were invited over to their place, and my dad, who was working, said it'd be okay if we went. He was laid back, just like my sister was. So we gather in my sister's old car and leave our middle-of-nowhere home to drive down an empty road at 9 o'clock at night. We make our way over to the trailer park portion of the town that was absolutely surrounded by a huge grassy field. My sister slows down to a 1-mile-per-hour crawl and stops at a stop sign. She doesn't go, even though we were the only ones there. I love my sister, and she was really mature in her later years, but back then, she could be a jerk. We were the younger siblings, so how could she resist giving us a little scare? That's pretty creepy, right? She asks us as we sit in the back seat. We look out into the dark field. It was very creepy. Beyond the field was a thick wooded area with God only knew what was hiding in it. I was young and scared of everything at the time, and I still had nightmares of the boogeyman hiding in my closet. Yeah, it makes me think of all those stories about freaks and creeps hiding in cornfields. My sister's friend played along. I honestly couldn't tell if she was in on it or not at the time. To me, she was just as genuinely freaked out as well. Despite her age, she did act like a kid at times. My sister still had the car in park while we all stared out in the distance. I don't think she really thought there was anything in the field, besides your usual collection of rural animals ranging from raccoons to deer. Her friend was still talking nervously. I remember this one story where a girl broke down next to a field like this one, and then some guy. She didn't finish her sentence. To this day, I'm not entirely sure what to say. I'm 21 now, and whenever I think about it, my mind conjures up shadows and not a figure. However, at the time, I would have told you it was definitely a man-shaped figure that suddenly popped up from the field and began running right towards our car. My brother and I screamed, but we weren't the only ones. My sister and her friend in the front seat, they screamed as well, louder than we did. My sister floored the gas pedal and nearly gave us all whiplash. I'm still not sure if she really saw anything, or was just shocked over our reaction to a bunch of shadows and nothingness. But I knew at the time, and I still know, that I saw something out there. It had the specific characteristics, that distinct head, shoulder, and arm shape. Something was coming towards our car. After we were well away from the field and arrived at the house, we exited the car and didn't mention a word to anyone else. We arrived at the friend's house, played games, went bowling, and had a good night until 12:45. For an 11-year-old boy, it was a very creepy and shocking experience to see someone rushing out at you from the darkness in seemingly the middle of nowhere. It made me wonder why he was there in the first place. I never did ask my sister if she was simply screwing around with us, or if she really did notice something. But something tells me that her little joke didn't go further than talking about spooky things while we were in the back seat. Whatever or whoever came from the field, and the look on my sister's face, and the tone of her scream, I knew she was scared. Whatever we saw that night, she was not expecting it. None of us were. Number 3. Nanny's Campfire Story. Submitted by Koi Koi. When I was young, my grandma, who I called Nanny, told my friends a creepy story one dark July night. It was a story she said her neighbor, one of my friend's moms, had told her, and she claimed it was very, very true. All these houses in the neighborhood were set up a few feet apart, lining the entire road. We all greeted each other by name. It was that kind of town. That Kentucky town had no strangers, which is why this tale was and still is quite chilling. I was 7 or 8 back then in the mid-90s. We were part of the last few generations to remember a time before home computers and cell phones were a staple. Swimming, biking, and telling scary stories on my nanny's front porch under the eerie glow of an orange street lamp, those were some of our favorite things to do when I visited, and some of my greatest and most joyful memories. This was one I'll never forget. After begging her to tell us another story, Nanny obliged, lighting up a cigarette. She exhaled and said, "Rosie told me something weird the other day. She told me she was up late one night watching TV in the living room when she heard a knock at the door. It was around midnight, so she went to the door thinking one of us might be in trouble." Just for reference, most of these houses had French doors with decorative glass panes you could semi-see through, and another glass or screen door on the outside. Anyway, back to the story. Rosie said when she came to the door, she was surprised to see someone she didn't recognize. They were waiting on the other side. Cautiously, she opened the front door, leaving the screen door locked. She described her guest as a young, petite woman with pale skin and long black hair that covered her face. The woman was standing on her front step barefoot in a white gown. Her head bowed so her hair covered the entire front of her face, while her hands were clasped at her stomach with upturned palms. Picture a child being scolded and standing in shame. Then my nanny demonstrated the posture, which made the story all the more chilling. We were all silent at this point, waiting nervously for her to continue as she paused to take a drag from her cancer stick. She picked back up, saying, "Rosie said she opened the door and asked the girl if she needed help, to which the strange girl only replied in a flat, emotionless voice, 'May I come in and use your phone?'" To Rosie, there were several things wrong with this picture. First, the stranger wanted access to her home with no explanation, other than to use her phone. The girl seemingly came out of nowhere. She was in a nightgown alone in late hours of the night, and she said, "May I?" instead of "Can I?" We lived in the South on the border of Tennessee. No one says "May I?" here. Rosie was not about to let this woman inside, but she didn't want to leave her alone in case she really did need help. So she decided to learn more about the situation, asking the girls questions like, "What's wrong? Are you lost? Hurt?" But the girl only answered in the same flat tone, "I need to come into your house. Please let me use your phone." Never once did the stranger look up or offer to move in any way. Again she asked, "Do you need to call a ride or the police?" But she was met with the same response of, "No, I need to come inside." Finally, Rosie told her she can't come in, but she could hand her the house phone to call someone. Now, my nanny's friend had a table against the wall where the phone sat, so all she had to do was turn around for a moment. However, when she turned back to the door, the girl was gone. She had vanished, as if she had never been there at all. Nanny said Rosie checked outside and found no one. There was nowhere for someone to go. The cul-de-sac had one road in and out on the other side. It was surrounded by sparse woods on Rosie's side, and thick woods on Nanny's side. Then there was a short drop-off with a little creek to the right, at the end of the neighborhood. In other words, she would have heard even bare feet running no matter which direction she had gone. As Nanny put out her smoke, we girls, 3 in total, asked if the story was true, and she shrugged with a smile, saying she didn't see a reason her friend would lie about it. My grandma was often the kind of person to pull your leg every now and then, but she would always admit to it, since lying wasn't in her Christian nature. She never once admitted to this one being a tall tale. That night, though, we had a sleepover in her living room floor, and I watched the door all night, waiting for any moment when the strange black-haired girl was going to knock. It never happened. I still wonder who or what she was, what she really wanted. What would have happened to Rosie if she had let the girl inside? Number 4. Campfire Creep. Submitted by Scott. A few months ago, during January, my friends and I all decided to go camping in this forest, pretty far from where we lived. We all had our cell phones, though, in case we needed to call someone. As all of us gathered around our campfire on the first night, starting our usual campfire activities like singing and telling scary stories, my friend picked up his ukulele, and just before he started to sing, we heard a loud sound coming from behind us. It was like the snapping of a twig. I called out to see if anyone was there, but there was no response. I've always been a very cautious person, so I got up and began walking over to where the noise had come from. There was nothing there. I was about to turn back around and go back to my friends around the campfire when I heard someone whispering. "Hey," they said. "Hey you, over here." The person sounded like a guy with a rather high-pitched voice. Then he laughed. I'll never forget that laugh. It's giving me chills now just thinking about it. I decided to simply walk back to my friends and calmly explain to them what happened. They believed me right away. We began to pack up our stuff, and I called my father to come pick us up. We were on our way to leave, but not before I heard the whisper again. "Goodbye, Scott. We'll see you again very soon. And number 5, Summer Break at Fudge Road. Submitted by CK Noir. It was the summer of 2011. I had recently joined a band and had been spending a lot of time on the road with my fellow bandmates. We had a night off from any shows and decided to all pile into the van for a drive around the countryside. Our bass player, Billy, was the driver. There was also Adam in the passenger seat, along with Eli, myself, and a friend named Ryan, all piled into the crowded back seat. That night was eerily quiet, and it soon sparked our curiosity for adventure. Now I should mention that in our town in rural Ohio, there were many strange and creepy urban legends, one of the most popular being the Crybaby Bridge. The Crybaby Bridge is located on a desolate road in the countryside of West Alexandria, Ohio. The legend has it that if you drive under the bridge, turn your car off and say, "Mama," 3 times, the cries of her and her child can be heard coming from the bridge. Being the curious teenagers we were, we decided to head to the notorious Fudge Road, where the bridge was located. We had arrived at our turn to begin traveling on the road when we came across a sign saying that the road was closed. We stopped our van for a moment, wondering if we had the right place. Adam insisted it was the place, so we drove around the sign and continued into the darkness of the road. It had an incredibly dark atmosphere about it, and was only big enough for one car to drive on. There were big trees on each side of the road, forming what looked like a shroud or tunnel, causing the headlights to be our only guide to the bridge. The stars in the night sky were enveloped in the darkness of the trees, and as we traveled along the dark road, we noticed multiple abandoned homes and sheds on the roadside. It seemed like the perfect place for a spooky adventure. But in the next few moments, we had regretted our decision to adventure down this mysterious trail. We finally managed to get near the bridge when we saw a car parked in the middle of the road. Like I mentioned before, the road wasn't very wide, so this car was essentially blocking the way to the bridge. The car seemed to be abandoned, as if someone had just left it there. We told Billy to try to go around, as the bridge was only a short distance away. It was at this point that we were able to pass the car, and we noticed someone was sitting in the driver's seat. We saw him clearly, a man wearing a mask. As if he had been trying to hide, he had his seat leaned all the way back. As soon as we passed his car, he started the engine, and soon enough his lights were following right behind us. In a panic, I told Billy to drive faster, that we were being followed. He sped up, but once he had reached the bridge, we realized it was a dead end. The bridge was damaged, and there was a large sign blocking the way. Our only choice was to turn around and drive back the way we came. Billy slid the van into the grass and started to do a K-turn in order to turn the van back around. It was then we saw the man's headlights coming even closer to us. We screamed and told Billy to drive fast, that we had to get around this guy. Adam grabbed the van's fire extinguisher from the back and threatened to throw it at the guy's car if he wouldn't let us through. The man's car sat still in the middle of the road, blocking our way out, headlights beaming. Then Billy floored it, speeding towards the car and sent it mowing through the field to the right of him. It was then that we could see the man in the driver's seat. He appeared to be loading a shotgun, looking up at us with that menacing mask. We screamed and told Billy to not stop for anything. The man attempted to follow us, but we were fortunate enough to get out of there before he could catch up. I had always heard so many stories about the paranormal events of Crybaby Bridge, but never the possibility of an armed maniac waiting for passersby, waiting for the next pair of kids who were foolish enough to enter his dark domain. People ignorant enough to chase down the urban legend. This experience was terrifying, but also very interesting in many ways. There were so many mysteries about this road, and many confirmed deaths linked to it. I had taken it upon myself to do a bit more research. It turns out we weren't the only group of people who had encountered or experienced the man following them on Fudge Road. There were many more stories online from other explorers seeing a man in a mask who sat in his car with a camera. It's said that he lives alongside the road in one of the few homes that are there, that he is tired of trespassers and would do anything to get rid of them. There's also a woman who is known to run outside with the camera, filming those who dare to come explore the road's dark wonders. All I know is that my experience at Fudge Road was very real and very frightening. Who knows what could have happened if the man had caught us? Just remember, urban legends are sometimes more than just campfire stories. Many of them were born from real, breathing circumstances. Never forget that there are monsters out there, and some of them live right next to us. Sharing campfire stories. The practice of spreading ghost stories and urban legends to your friends and family. The term doesn't even require a campfire to know what you're in for. Campfire stories contain tales of the unknown, often with an unforeseen twist or moral, some based in reality, others just really good spooks. I think most of us love campfire stories, but I can say certainly that being part of a campfire story is an entirely different and deadly matter. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to send me your creepy true stories at darknessprevails.org/submit. I'm looking for stories about creepy sewers, fire lookout experiences, and anything scary, really. If you want to support my channel further, you can go to morbidmonsters.com to get some creepy cool merchandise, or go to patreon.com, donate $1 a month, and you'll get your name in the credit of videos like this one. If you're like me and you're broke, you can still help by downloading the Spooked app off the Google Play Store for free, or go to my channel page and click my Dark World YouTube channel link. That's my other channel dedicated to mysterious countdowns and lists, so subscribe there for even more horror videos. Now then, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 5 real monsters in the forest. Michael Pelzer says, Chewbacca in the forest. I know that's a joke, but if you really saw something like Chewbacca in the middle of the woods at night, I think we all might just soil ourselves. Let's be real here. Ulysses Peralta says, I am hungry. Go cook yourself a hot dog and quit watching monster videos. Unless that makes you hungry, then you've got other problems, my friend. Storytime says, I've given up on trying to be featured on your favorite comments, Darknesses. I love my fans, and I'll say this with all due respect. Baby gonna cry? Let this be a lesson. If you're gonna complain because you weren't early enough or clever enough with your comment to be featured in a video like this, oh baby, I'll feature it. But I'm gonna make fun of you. But it's in a loving way. Mwah. Seriously though, I try to reach out via these comments and replies. Once I reached a certain amount of views and subscribers, it became impossible for me to reply to everyone. I mean, physically impossible if I dedicated 24 hours a day to do it. So that's why I decided to reply to comments. Doing my picks of the early comments from the previous video and giving them replies, it's like my way to respond to everyone, as best I can. So I'm sorry if I can't reach you. Magical Unicorn says, the king of creepy stories returns again. Oh, is the next season of the No Sleep podcast out? And Swamp Dweller says, I'll backflip over a Bigfoot. I don't give a frank. Go back to the swamp, you crazy psycho. Considering the size of Bigfoot, I doubt anyone could even jump over his member. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another Darkness Prevails video. I appreciate it. Here are the credits to my patrons who donate that little extra to help me with my channel. Until next time, stay safe out there and stay creepy.